Hi, I'm Anna. Thanks for joining me on this project. If you need any materials, check out the links in the description below. The first step in making our bracelet is going to be making one section. So we're going to start with one section, and if we just look at the one set of 4 IrisDuos, we have the center here, and then we have our 4 IrisDuos on the outside. So it creates this square flower shape. So that's what we're going to start with. And we're going to start, of course, in the center and then build outwards. So to start, I have my thread here with my stop bead, just a few inches at the end of my stop bead. And I'm going to pick up 4 of my crystals. And just let all your beads fall down to the stop bead and pass through your first crystal so that when you pull it tight, it pulls your other 3 crystals around and you create a little circle. So once you've got this little circle of your crystals, we're going to add an 11-0. So we're going to pick up one 11-0 and we're going to pass through to the next crystal. So what this does is add a 11-0. You'll add one 11-0 in between each crystal, and it'll sit on top of the thread that you can see running between your crystals. So one 11-0 and through the next crystal, and another 11-0 and through the next crystal. And don't get confused by your stop bead here. And here's my last 11-0, so I have picked up 4 11-0s. And I've picked up 4 11-0s and sat them in between all of those crystals. Pass through one 11-0. And now we're going to add some 11-0s on top of the crystals. So you're going to pick up 3 11-0s and pass through the next 11-0 from the previous step. And when we pull our thread tight, that'll just set those 3 11-0s that we just added on top of that crystal. So we're going to do this 3 more times and pick up 3 11-0s, pass through that next 11-0. We're hopping over the crystal, passing through the 11-0, and the 3 11-0s that we just added are going to sit nice and tight and snug next to the crystal that we were hopping over. And pass through our next 11-0, 3 more 11-0s here, through the next 11-0 on the other side of the crystal. And there we go, we've completed this step. So now we have a border of 11-0s all around our crystals. So you're going to want to pass through the next 2 11-0s. So these are the first 2 11-0s in that set of 3 that we just added. We're going to start adding our IrisDuo petals, the petals to our 4-petaled flower. So every time we add an IrisDuo, we're going to start with this 11-0 that is the second in that set of 3 that we added. So this 11-0 will be the second in that set of 3, and it'll be sitting directly on top of the crystal that that set of 3 is framing. So we're going to come out of that 11-0. We're going to pick up 2 more 11-0s, and we're going to pick up an IrisDuo. And when you pick up the IrisDuos, there is a top and a bottom side, or a right side and a wrong side, a domed side and a flat side. So we want the dome side to be facing up. So you're just going to pick it up so that you have the dome side facing up. And you want to make sure that you do that consistently so that all your IrisDuos are facing in the same direction. 2 more 11-0s and through that 11-0 at the base again. So we're going to go pass through that same 11-0 several times. Up through the 2 11-0s on the side towards the open hole of our IrisDuo. Pick up 3 11-0s and go through that open hole of the IrisDuo. And this will just make more of a frame around our IrisDuo. And then we need another 3 11-0s for the other side here. And take our needle and thread down through the two 11-0s at the base. And again, we're going to pass through that 11-0 at the base that sits directly above our crystal. And you can give it a good, nice, tight tug, and just make sure you don't have any slack in your thread. If you do have slack, if you want to tighten it up, pass through all your 11-0s and that IrisDuo again, and just get everything nice and tight before moving on. So now that I've added that IrisDuo, I'm going to add the next one. I'm just going to pass through my 11-0 border around my crystals until I pass through the 11-0 where I'm going to begin my next, attaching my next IrisDuo. And that is 1, 2, 3, 4 11-0s from the one that I just used. Again, that will be the 11-0. That's the second in that group of 3 that we added to frame the crystal. So again, we're going to just pick up two 11-0s, pick up our IrisDuo, another 2 11-0s, go through that same 11-0 at the base there, pull tight, and you can see how now it's starting to form that second petal. So continue on by adding 3 on either side, and then you're going to continue adding IrisDuos to each 2 more of these crystals here. So each crystal gets an IrisDuo, and continue on adding IrisDuos the same way that we added this first one, and then we will move on to the next step. Now that I've completed my first section of IrisDuos, I'm going to start connecting them together. So I'm going to start creating more and connecting them as I go. So this is the first one that I just did with you. And I have a second one started here. And I've done this exactly the same way as this first one. But I'm going to stop after I've done 2 IrisDuos. And my next 2 IrisDuos that I'm going to add are then going to link to my other sections of the bracelet. So after creating 2 IrisDuos or adding 2 IrisDuos to this section, I'm going to move on to create my third IrisDuo. So I'm going to go around the center here around my crystals and get in position to add my third IrisDuo. So I'm coming out the correct 11-0. I'm going to pick up 2 of my 11-0s, pick up that IrisDuo, another 2 11-0s, back through that 11-0 at the base, up through the 2 11-0s on the side. And now what I want to do is take the section that I'm working on and line it up with the section that I'm going to add it to. And this way I'll be able to identify exactly where I'm going to add it. So I'm always going to add it using the 3 11-0s that I add towards the top or the outer section, the outer side of my IrisDuo. So if I line it up here to the section that I want to attach it to, I can see that I'm going to use the 11-0 at the very end of my line of 11-0s here. I'm going to pick up 2 11-ohs, and then instead of picking up a third, I'm going to share the 11-oh at the end of the border of the IrisDuo directly across from where I'm working. So I'm going to share this this 11-oh here, and then I'm going to pass through that open hole of my IrisDuo. So I'm following the same exact pattern. The only difference is that I'm sharing an 11-oh with the section that I'm attaching it to. So I'm attaching the current section that I'm working on with a section that's already done. And I'm going to give a nice tight pull, pick up 3 11-ohs because I'm not attaching it to anything on the outside here. So I'm going to pick up all 3 11-ohs that I need and continue just like I did with the section where I wasn't attaching. And I'm going to move on to get myself in position here to add the next 11-oh, or sorry, the next IrisDuo. And pick up 2 11-ohs, pick up the next IrisDuo, 2 11-ohs, and this is the same for all the IrisDuos that we're adding. This part is the same at the base when we first attach it. The only difference is once we get to the set of 3 11-ohs at the top here to create the top part of the border. So since I'm adding the 3 11-ohs on the outside border here, I'm not attaching it to anything from this other section, so I'm just going to pass through my IrisDuo like normal. But I am going to share the 11-oh here, the very last 11-oh in the border of my gold IrisDuo here. So this 11-oh here that I'm going to share becomes the first in the set of 3 that I would normally be picking up. So I only need 2 more to create that set of 3. And I'm going to pass through the 11-ohs at the base of my IrisDuo. Again, nothing different than what I have done on all the other IrisDuo sections that I've added. And give that a nice tight pull. And so now I've joined them. And the only 2 11-ohs that I'm sharing are the 11-ohs on the inside at the top, or the very last 11-ohs of the border on the inside of my IrisDuos. So now I'm at a point where I can take my thread and just tie that off and then continue to add sections. So all the sections that I'm going to add are going to be just like what we just did here. I'm going to do 2 IrisDuos, and then the second 2 IrisDuos I'm going to match up and attach to the appropriate 11-ohs. Okay, so you can see that I have now added several sections, several of my IrisDuo flower sections, and I've alternated the color here to kind of give it some more interest. So I've added several of these together, and it's a pretty long bracelet. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to add my clasp and finish up the border. So you can see in my sample here that this sample here has a lot more crystal and border to it. So we're going to do that to this one down here. So I'm going to start on one of my ends of the bracelet. And what I'm going to do is use this 11-oh here as my stop bead. So at the end here on my last IrisDuo, or my last IrisDuo section, I'm going to use one of my 11-ohs here as a stop bead. And I'm on the very outside of the project. And then I'm going to pick up 6 11-ohs. That should be 6. Yep. And then I'm going to go to the inside of the project and go through the 11-Os on the other side of my IrisDuo. And so if I add those 6 11-Os, that will then complete the border of my IrisDuos. I want to come out, I want to pass through those 3 11-Os, that set of 3 that we were adding previously, but not through the 2 at the very bottom. So I'm going to leave a distance of 2 IrisDuo, or 2 11-Os here at the base of my IrisDuo. I'm going to pick up an 11, a crystal, and another 11. And then again on this side here, skipping the 2 11-Os, pass through the 3 at the very end of that border that I have. And then I'll add those that crystal and those 11-Os in there. So again, on this side, on this IrisDuo, I'm going to do the same I did here. And I'm going to pick up 6 11-Os. And pass through my 3 11-Os on the outside border here of my IrisDuo. And pull that tight so there's no slack. I'm going to pass through the whole of my IrisDuo. And through these 3 beads that I just added. So through the through the 11-O, the crystal, and the 11-O. So just through those beads that we added. And here I'm going to add my cup button. So to add my cup button, I'm just going to pick up 3 11-Os through the cup button from the back side. And then you can pick up a couple crystals. I'm picking up an 11, a crystal, and an 11. Back through the other hole of that cup button. Another 3 11-Os. And then I'm going to pass through those same 3 beads again, so my 11-O, my crystal, and my 11-O in the same direction. And then this will attach that cup button to the end. So I would also go through here and reinforce it, go back through all your beads again. And if you can't go through, if you do the same thing as me and you have an 11, a crystal, and an 11, and you can't go back through your 11s if it's just giving you too much trouble, just go through the crystal. And down that second hole of the cup button. So now I've reinforced this attachment here of my cup button. I'm going to go around the border of my IrisDuo. So I'm going to go up. I'm going to go work towards the outside of the project here, go through my IrisDuos, or through my 11-Os around my IrisDuo. So all of the ones that we've just added. And all I'm doing here is getting myself back in position in those IrisDuos that go, or those 11-Os that go around the IrisDuos, so I can continue with my border. So I've gone through all of the 6 seed beads that I added around the IrisDuos. And I'm going to pass through the next 3. I'm going to pick up 1 11, 1 crystal, and then 1 11-O. And then I'm going to go up through the 3 11-ohs that are the last 3 11-ohs in that border of the next IrisDuo. So I've gone down, I've crossed over to the next IrisDuo using my 11, my crystal, my 11, up through the very last or outside 3 11-ohs. And now I'm going to add my outside border here. So far we've added this little section here, this cross. Now we're going to add this border. I'm going to pick up 2 11-ohs, a crystal, and 2 11-ohs. And then down through the next 3 11-ohs. So I've gone from one color section to the next color section here. Again, just using those 3 11-ohs that are at the end of that border. And I'm going to continue here with an 11, a crystal, and an 11. And then again, using the same 3 11-ohs, just go up the 3 11-ohs towards the outside of the project. 2 11-ohs, a crystal, and 2 11-ohs. And we're switching from one color to the next here and crossing this border here. Down through the next 3 11-ohs. And we're just going to complete this pattern the full length of this side of the bracelet. And then once we get to the other side of the bracelet, we will add our loop for our cup button. I've now finished my border on this underside here of the bracelet, so you can see it really adds a lot more pizzazz and finishes off the whole design. So now that I've completed that, I'm all the way on this end of the bracelet here, opposite of where my cup button was. And I'm now going to add a loop for my cup button. So I'm going to just continue like I did, following the same steps that I did for my cup button. And I'm going to finish this border around the end of the IrisDuo here by picking up 6 11-ohs, 4, 5, 6 11-ohs. Down through 3 11-ohs. I pick up an 11, a crystal, and an 11. And then up through 3 11-ohs on the IrisDuo opposite. And then I'm going to add finish the border to this IrisDuo here, so I need another 6 11-oh seed beads. Yep, that's 6. And down through 3 on the other side of my IrisDuo here. And when I pull that, that'll pull all these seed beads tight to the IrisDuo. I'm going to pass through the whole of the IrisDuo here. And if I've gone through just the 3 seed beads that I should be coming out right next to that hole. And then pass through my 11, my crystal, and my 11. And so this is the exact same steps that we took to add the cup button at this end. But what we're going to do now, instead of adding a cup button, is just create a loop that will fit around our cup button. So I'm going to start by picking up about 22 11-ohs. And then what you're going to do is just make sure that this length of a loop is going to accommodate your cut button. So I'm going to take my needle and thread through my 11 and my crystal again, just this section here that, just these 3 beads that I added to span between the IrisDuos. And I want to make sure that that loop is going to work and accommodate my cut button. So if it doesn't, if it's a little short, you're just going to take your needle and thread back through your beads here. Just undo this loop. And we're going to add a couple more beads. I'm going to add 4 more beads because I think 4 more beads will accommodate the cut button. At least I think so. So we're going to find out. I go through just a couple of beads here just to give the loop, just to be able to hold the loop tight and firm so that it's not going to come undone and give me a false idea of whether or not that's going to fit. So that works. So that worked really well for me. So now I'm able to go back through all my seed beads again, all the ones that I added for that loop, and I'm going to reinforce it. It's always a good idea just to reinforce any seed beads that you're using for your clasp. I've now reinforced my clasp and made sure that the loop that I made for my cut button was big enough and fit comfortably. So now what I'm going to do is work on the border down the side of the bracelet where I still don't have a border. So coming out of the base of my clasp here, the base of the loop that I've made for my cut button, I'm going to go up the seed beads along the IrisDuo. So that'll be the 3 beads and the 6 beads that we are adding around the end of the IrisDuo here. And I'm going to work my way all around to the other side of the IrisDuo, through all of the 6 beads that we added and the set of 3 that we added in one of our previous steps. So again, I'm going to keep a space of 2 seed beads at the base of the IrisDuo, and I'm not going to do anything with those 2 seed beads. And I'm going to continue with my border just like I did on the other side. So in between my IrisDuos here of the same color, I'm picking up an 11-0, a crystal, and an 11-0. Skipping 2 11-0s and just going through the last 3 11-0s here. Picking up 2 11-0s, a crystal, 2 more 11-0s, crossing over to the next color section, down through 3 of my 11-0s. Oops, accidentally got 4 there, so 3 of my 11-0s. And again, continuing in the same fashion that we did on the other side. So adding my sections, low sections connecting IrisDuos of the same color, and my outside border connecting the IrisDuos of different colors. So continue on until we get to the other end of our bracelet, and then we will be pretty much done with this bracelet, just ready to tie it off and make sure that we don't have any thread we need to get rid of. I finished my border on the section on the side of my bracelet here. So now I have both borders done. I'm at my very last step here. So I'm going to be picking up my 1 11-0, my crystal, and my 11-0, which you can see I already have on my thread here. And the very last thing I need to do is pass through those last 3 11 here, and one of them I had used for my stop bead. Getting tangled here. One of them I had used for my stop bead when we started at the very beginning of this step here, where we started adding our cup button. So if you've done the same thing that I have and you had that stop bead there, I'm just going to undo my thread from around that bead, and then I can use that tail to tie off my bracelet. So if you put your stop bead, if you make your bead, your stop bead, in at the very beginning of where you're going to start this border section, you're going to end up in the same place, and then you can tie those two threads together, burn them down, and then your bracelet is completely done. So the only other thing that I would do here is just check for any loose ends, anything that you can cut and burn down. If you have any sections that you haven't tied off all your threads, just double check those. But other than that, you have a complete bracelet.